this morning. God gave us a great victory. But it is nothing compared to what he is ready to give us now. I know you are all tired and hungry, but I swear to you that even if these English were hanging from the clouds by their fingertips, we would pull them down before nightfall. Now, let all those who love me follow me!
We have work to do.
They cannot all be armed in time. We don't have the means.
Build a dam to open the stream, work the furnaces night and day. We will drive the machine of war with the sword and the spear and the iron fist of the orc.
Hello again everyone and welcome back. This is episode 9 in my continuing series of video scenario guides. I do appreciate you looking in, and today, as you can see, we will be discussing Reikland Factory. Now I've always liked this one. As you all know, it features a 3-point capture mechanic, and the basic info of course is the steam tank plant yields more points per capture. The 2 outer flags yield more points over time for controlling them. And that leads to a few tactics and that you can employ to attempt to win the scenario, but we'll get into all that in a little bit. The first thing I'd like to do, if you'll indulge me for a moment, is I want to spend a minute sort of restating my underlying philosophy, which guides the creation of these videos. And it stems from my belief that the primary goal, primary purpose of playing in any scenario is to win that scenario, and the most efficient means to accomplish that goal is to play to the mechanics of the scenario. Now of course all of us get into that SC here and there. I mean, it's just part of the game where you pug in, or you go in with a group and you're up against a double pre-made or even a single good pre-made, and there's really not much you can do. You get driven back to your spawn point. I mean, it happens. But the context here is always when both sides have room to maneuver, when both sides can put up a fight and attempt to manipulate circumstances to their benefit. And that's what I try to talk about, is manipulating the circumstances of any scenario combined with playing to the mechanics of that scenario, and then win. Which brings me to the video that you're watching. Now, many times I'll go into Reikland Factory and people start screaming in scenario chat. Don't go to the mid, don't go mid, stay outside. And at least in context, at the beginning of the SC, I've always had to wonder why. Now what you're watching are the beginnings, the opening segments for 7 different scenarios of Reikland Factory that I was in. And 7 times at the beginning of the scenario, I went straight to the midpoint. And at least in these particular 7 cases, what you'll see is that nobody else came in. Order typically runs for the warehouse, destruction runs for the machine shop, and nobody comes in here. And I have to wonder, why? There are 50 points sitting here to be taken at the beginning of each scenario. 50 points. That's 10% of what you need to win. So why not go get them? And I try to do that every time I get into the scenario, is go to the mid and grab it. And it brings me to the first point I suppose I want to make about playing Reikland Factory. That those 50 points are sitting there, waiting for somebody to come get them. And at the beginning of the SC, it's my belief that you should go get them. Alright, the counter argument to that, of course, is, well, what happens if you go to the midpoint and the enemy shows up? Well, that leads to fighting in the SC, and who would imagine that you go into a scenario and fight the opposition? I mean, come on. Alright, I'm being a little facetious here, but if it leads to a scenario fight at the beginning, at the midpoint, then so be it. But most of the time you're going to go in there and just capture the points. Now, as you can see, the basic strategy in Reikland Factory toward winning does rely on maintaining the flags. But watch out for this. Now, as you can see, an engineer here dropped a turret, and there's a bullet headed up to the L tracks, the overhead track there. Because one of the first things that happened in this particular scenario is destruction casters went up on the ramp, up on the train tracks, and just were waiting for somebody to ride underneath. Now, that's a perfectly fine strategy. We'll talk more about it later. But what I'm doing is clearing that guy off. You can see it's a sword. And you have to do that. I wanted to make that point early that, you know, people are going to go up on the tracks on both sides. But when they do, you can't just let them sit there. You've got to go up and run them off, and either, you know, command it for yourself, or just once you run them off, move on somewhere else. Now that brings me to my next point. When I say move on somewhere else, that is continual in Reikland Factory. Key to putting yourself in a position to win here is keep moving. I left this particular segment of video in here not because there was any great fighting going on, but because as you watch it, you can see the flags keep changing. Somebody's moving around. Order's moving around in this case. Okay, Destruction's moving around. Destruction just gained 50 points. And people are moving. While we're fighting here, others are moving around and flipping the flags. And that is a must. Now, it may sound simple. It may sound like something like, okay, everybody knows that. You know, what are you wasting our time for? Everybody knows that. But not everybody does. You'll find, just as in Gates of Ekron, you will find here that some people will go to a flag and then sit on it. Okay, just like in Gates of Ekron, as I said then, that is a waste of time. The object here is to maintain control of the flags. And you can do that in one of two ways. One is by moving, and this is what I suggest most often, continual movement. Okay, you flip a flag and then you move on. You know, you capture a flag and then you leave it. Don't leave it. Don't waste time guarding one of these. Just get to the next one. Now, the fighting that's going on here, we actually control the warehouse, but Destructions had gone there in an attempt to flip it. We engaged them at this point, and now we're locked in this battle. All right, this is fine too. This is what you want, because while you're fighting this battle, what is not happening is that the flags are not changing hands. And we have the steam tank plant and the warehouse, and that's going to give us more points over time than it will the enemy. So, our first few points that we made here, go ahead and talk about. As in Gates of Ekron, there is no need to guard flags here. You flip one, you move on. You keep moving from point to point. As in High Pass Cemetery, watch what your enemy is doing. If the opposition wants to engage you, as opposed to flipping the flags, then by all means, let them do that. Because, particularly in the case that I just showed, if you have control of two of the flags and your opposition comes in and wants to battle you out in this area, engage them. You may win the fight, you may lose the fight, but over the time that it takes for that battle to progress, you will have gained more points than your enemy. In this segment of video, I left this entire segment in just as an illustration of playing the mechanics of Reikland Factory, playing the flip the flags, and trying to get as many points as you can, or enough points to win. Now, at the moment I did the freeze frame there, Destruction had a machine shop, the other two were open. We captured a warehouse, so in accordance with what I'm discussing here, we do move immediately. And that is a point I may make, again here and there, but I just think that's key. As I talked about with Gates of Ekron, that's a key here, is that you keep moving. And this is another reason to do that. The destruction players here, in this particular scenario, are playing the flags. Because in this particular SC, it was true that the destruction players in here could not defeat us as a whole on the battlefield. And I'm not, denigrating anyone, and I don't mean it that way at all. But we've all been there. We've all been in an SC like that, where, particularly in Reikland Factory, where you can't just outright roll over the opposition. So the other option is to play the flags. Some people call that PvE in the scenario. Okay, you want to call it that, fine. But your only option is to play the flags. And that's what Destruction is doing here. They're running around behind us, attempting to flip the flags and get as many points as they can. Now I froze here to show this, to illustrate that. You can see Destruction pushing out of the doorway down there, and they're headed back to the machine shop. So naturally, we have to get up and get moving, and get over to the machine shop and try to prevent them from locking it. So there they are. I think there's 3 of them there, yeah. And the point here is, well, that's the point. Okay, they got the points, and that's all that really matters. We may kill these 3 guys. That's part of the game. But what is important in the mechanics of Reikland Factory is that they went to the machine shop and flipped it. And right now they control 2 points. And so while this particular fight is going on, Destruction is racking up more victory points for this period of time than we are. And that is the purpose of employing this particular strategy that they are doing here, running around behind us and getting the flags. Okay, and as you can see, the steam tank plant just neutralized. So of course that means that the order is in there. The warehouse is now neutral, and so is the machine shop. So let's freeze this for a second. This has been a rotating match. The scores here, yeah, we're up by about a little over 150 points. But theoretically, Destruction could still win this. But watch what happens from this point. Okay, we get the warehouse, we get the steam tank plant. There are 75 points, and now all we have to, the warehouse is open, and all we have to do is run over there and take it. Okay, Destruction was putting up a fight here. So they had gone there, they get the warehouse points. But still, now it's a foregone conclusion. To win, all we have to do is flip the warehouse, and the 25 points we get off of that will be enough to win. So let's just let that play out real quick. Alright, there it is. Points can tend to add up fast sometimes in Reikland Factory, particularly if you're flipping the flags on a regular basis. Now, a few other points to look at. The first one is the L train, the overhead tracks. I discussed that before, but there's another reason to go up here. And I will often do this in Reikland Factory, and I've been asked on occasion why I'm doing it. So I'm going to discuss that. One reason to come up here is if you control the steam tank plant first, you can see if Destruction's coming in behind you, because that will flip. You can also look right and you can see the warehouse. You can see what's going on over there. You can look left, see the machine shop. You can see what's going on over there, how many people are there. Or your opposition can come up and join you, and you have a brief fight to one side or the other. But the point is, this is a reconnaissance point. You can go up and see the entire battlefield and then decide where you want to go next. And as you saw, we decided to head toward the machine shop. Another thing that can happen at Reikland Factory, like in Gates of Ekron, is you can get into a hallway fight. I hate hallway fights. They tend to end badly. But this is just a brief example of that. So for the same reasons as I discussed in Gates of Ekron, try to avoid the hallway fights. Another thing that can happen in Reikland Factory is, which also happens in Gates sometimes, is you get into a fight and you wonder, why won't this guy go down? You're beating on him, you're doing enough damage that you think is certainly sufficient to take the guy out, and he just won't go down. And you're trying to figure out why. Well, it goes back to the elevated train. Oh, there's somebody up there. Now that, in this case, that looks like a witch elf, but the point is still valid. If there's a healer up there who's healing the people below you, You have to account for that. You have to look up every now and then, because the players will be up there. It's just a good place to go, because it's just kind of true that most people tend not to look up even while playing a video game. Now this next segment of video does offer a bit of steam tank plant fighting, but I have to be honest here and tell you guys why I left this in. I left it in because I liked how this fight progressed. It just, it was just one of those that I found fun. And since I have stopped doing the sort of montage videos, at least for a while, I admit this is a bit of, just a little bit of self-promotion. I just enjoyed this particular fight. The Doc runs in first, and he's followed up by a Marauder, who's then followed up by a Blackguard. I get a little help here, and we start rummaging around for control of the steam tank plant. And as you can see in the background, here I stick with the theme, the outer points at this moment were controlled by order. And as I talked about at the beginning of the video, as I try to do every time an SC like this starts, I did come into the middle just to try to snatch up 50 points for our side. And then that fight happened, so I wanted to include it. We have 350. This is going to give us 400. Oh, 421, because we also had the outside. And we go on to win this particular scenario. Before we move on to our next video segment, we'll take a moment here just to review some of the things I've said. The elevated track, you can use that for reconnaissance. I do that often. You can just get up there and look around, see what's going on, and make a quick decision as to where you're going to go next. But you don't want to keep the enemy off there. Keep the RDPS from using it. Avoid the hallway fights. I also meant to put into the previous screen that keep the healers off there as well, because the healers will go up there and hide. Some of them are good at that. They'll literally go up there and hide, and you just have to watch out for that. Take the midpoint when possible, because there's 50 points sitting there. You might as well go get them. Now this next segment of video is again from a pre-made group, running with Zax and company, the usual suspects. We did have Magnet Beards along with us this night. But as we did in the Norden Watch scenario, and I talked about where we did the behinder movement here, we do one that is called the Infronter. We head around over to the destruction side, straight across, and attempt to cut off, those who are coming in sort of behind the main mass. Now we, of course, didn't know this going into the scenario, but in a moment you're going to see the unbalanced message. There's my dog. But the point here is just to disrupt your opposition. Destruction, of course, can do this just as easily, and I've seen Destruction do this in Reikland Factory. Especially, there's a particular pre-made group who seems to love that particular strategy of cutting straight across and heading for the order spawn point. But this is why you're doing it. Anything to unbalance your opponent. Anything to keep them off guard. Now what happens next? We head for a flag, to take one. But what happens next, this is the same scenario. A bunch of destruction forces logged in, and they came out and rolled us. So we had to respawn. And when we did, look at this. We went to the midpoint. So I go back to the first point I made in the video. We go here to get the points. Now, at this moment, there's really nothing for us to do except head toward the machine shop, because the map is telling us that's where destruction is. Now, as you watch this particular segment, keep in mind, please, that we're in comms. So there is some comm chatter going on here that accounts for some of the things that we're doing. In particular, Zax was saying, don't go out there, fight inside. So I stuck my nose out and then came back in, because that's what the team leader wanted us to do. So we fight around here for a few minutes, but it does help to illustrate one of the statements I made earlier. Again, watch the flags. we control 2 flags, and they're not changing. So as long as they're not changing, we can fight here. We can fight here as long as we need to, because over the course of this battle, the time that it takes, we are, again, gaining more points than the enemy is. Well, we clean those guys up. So of course we're going to head toward the machine shop and flip the flag there. It's always a nice idea, you saw that, and it's always a nice idea to look around, see what's going on behind you. Okay, now the map again is speaking to you here. The map is speaking to us, it's telling us, okay, now destruction's at the warehouse. So as I discussed earlier, get up and move immediately. Now we're going to go over there and we're going to get into another protracted fight. I decided to leave this particular segment of video in here for a couple of reasons. One, something is going to take place in a few moments that I thought was interesting, but it's basically just flag fighting for a few moments. And again, our opposition in this scenario is putting in basically the same, are applying, I should say, the same techniques that we are. They're attempting to capture flags and score as many points as they can. But at the moment here, the score's pretty close, 368 to 313. But they come out to the warehouse and engage us in a fight, which, because there is another player at the flag, you see another swordmaster sitting there, and all he's doing is sitting there attempting to capture the flag while we fight, and he's successful in doing that. So now we're exactly where we need to be. Regardless of whether this is a pre-made or pre-made fight, it doesn't matter what it is. We have 2 flags, and all we have to do is maintain those, and we will win the scenario. Now, I get in a fight with this particular orc. I always wondered if that cost any action points, but I eventually kill him, and I get a title here. I've killed 10 guild leaders. So all you guild leaders out there who may not have been aware that that particular title existed, well, there you go. Now you know that every time you go down, somebody is building toward a new sort of metal ribbon to pin on their chest. Over on the other side, I wanted to comment on it while it was going on, but there was a swordmaster over there who captured a flag named Cheesy Band, and we've often wondered if he was perhaps one of the devs, because who else would name themselves Cheesy Band? I'm not, making any issue out of it. I thought it was kind of funny. But anyway, we go on to win a particular scenario because we were again able to maintain control over the flags over the course of time. Well, that brings us to our final steampunk babe here to talk about a few points. In Reikland Factory, this is where you want to be. Mobile, agile, and hostile. I learned that in basic training. Use the height advantage when you can. There are a number of reasons we talked about for going up there, but keep your opposition on the ground. Take the steam tank plant at the SC start. Why not? It's there. Why not? And then from that point on, you could attempt to control any 2 points for the win. Try not to get bogged down. That's true in any scenario, but mobility here triumphs. You want to be able to keep moving and influence the mechanics of the scenario. And if you can do that, 9 times out of 10, you're going to win. Oh, look, there's another one. Alright, so episode 10, we'll go move on to Cain's Embrace. And that can be a rather explosive scenario. I like that one as well. But until then, guys, thanks for watching. Take care of yourselves, and we will see you next time.
Excuse me. Excuse me? Oh, you couldn't help noticing. Yeah!